America's healthcare advocate, Carrie Hall.
Hello, America. Welcome to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. You can find out more about us by going to the website americashealthcareadvocate.com and your favorite podcast platform. We're on 15 of those, and we're also on YouTube and our own YouTube channel. By the way, in addition to that, we are on 234 stations around the country, and we want to welcome our latest one, which is KRFE AM and FM 95.9 from Lubbock, Texas. And that'll be appropriate today because Sheriff Cal Hayden is joining us in studio again, and he just got back from Texas. And we have a fascinating story to share with all of you about what he saw, what he did, what was going on, how they're interdicting this kind of illegal activity coming into this country, specifically coming in as it comes up the I35 corridor to Johnson County. You know, we talked about this in the last show when we defined this issue. We showed you pictures of the candy and the foods being distributed that are laced with fentanyl. We talked about sex trafficking in Olathe in terms of massage parlors. We talked about a host of issues. Well, the sheriff just got back from El Paso, Texas. When I heard about this, I invited him to come on up to the studio to go through this because I wanted you to hear what's going on, what he learned, what they're doing, and how that's going to be interpreted for what goes on in Johnson County. Welcome back, Sheriff.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you up here. So when I heard about this, Steve Sanborn, my partner, said, I said, how's the sheriff doing? He said, well, he just got back from 8 days in Texas. I said, what was he doing? He said he took a task force down there, took a canine unit down there and a group of his deputies down there, and they actually went down for this 8 days, and you were embedded with this police department, which sounds like a crackerjack police department in El Paso, Texas. So talk a little bit about them for a minute, and then what motivated you to go down there and do this, and then we'll get into what occurred, because it's absolutely fascinating. So go ahead.
Well, yes, we did. We took 8 of our officers down to El Paso. We drove down and embedded with their gang and intelligence unit, which covers narcotics, prostitution, and they do just a little bit of everything. We stayed with them for about a week, and I got to give a shout out to some of the officers down there in El Paso. The chief, Paquilas, I think it is let us go down there. He's a great guy. We met with him and his deputy chief, and they approved us to come down. And it's rare that you get this opportunity to do this, but we worked our tails off for a week. Our guys were up at 3 a.m. They worked every day. It was at least a 12-hour day.
So you mentioned before we went on the air that typically when you've done these kind of things, it's been more training and intelligence. This was very, very different. The reason why we're doing this, just so you know, is I'm closing the loop here on you wonder how this stuff gets up here and how this affects us in our little cocoon here in Johnson County. That's what we're going to talk about today, how this affects everybody in this county, and why the sheriff took the initiative to do this. So back to my question, most of the time when you've done this in the past, it's been down for 2 or 3 days. It's training, it's intelligence. This was a whole different deal.
Oh, yeah.
You were literally embedded with them doing the interdictions, doing the arrests. Talk a little bit about that process and what was that like?
Well, it was very different. I mean, usually you go in a classroom and you got somebody teaching you the trends and what's going on. This is literally where the rubber meets the road. And we rode along with their officers. We helped them. We searched when they searched. It was just an amazing experience. They're very different police work. We do a lot of things based off tips. Everything they do is proactive. They're out looking for it, and they make their own cases, and they do a really good job of it.
So what does that mean when you say proactive? In other words, they're not waiting for somebody to say there's a load of cocaine or a load of fentanyl or 15 women that are going to be brought across the border. They're doing proactive intelligence work. How are they doing that? That's fascinating.
You know, it is fascinating because the guys we rode with were lieutenants, and they're working lieutenants. But my first impression of this group was these aren't rookies that are doing this. These are 20, 25-year officers that have been seasoned veterans. They've got a group of rookies that work with them. They call them rookies. They're 3-4-year officers that they call the streets unit, and they make street buys. And they will go out proactively and find out who's selling dope, make some street buys from them, and then try to roll them into the bigger dope dealers. But the rest of the guys, they have one that works vice. They watch hotels. They look for human trafficking in hotels, movement in these cheaper, kind of shady hotels, or drug activity that goes on there. And they know how to spot them because they're good at it. That's what they do. So they're making cases as they go, rather than waiting, well, we have a tip here. We don't have any tips today, so we're not doing anything. It's a different ball game. When we got there, and he said, I need you guys to come in at 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, okay, what are we doing? He said, well, we're going to search the buses when they come in. We have buses that come through El Paso, and they...
Wait, where did the buses come from, Sheriff? Mexico?
California, and all points anywhere. It used to be Greyhound, and other companies bought them out. But when they drop off riders to El Paso, they run dogs through the luggage, and they check the luggage. And if you've got drugs, they work you, and they find out what's going on. And Texas down there is really very similar to Johnson County. New Mexico has marijuana, legalized marijuana.
Right, just like Missouri.
Just like Missouri, just like Colorado.
Yeah.
Texas doesn't. So they're getting a lot of this activity. These people bringing all these edibles and all these things they can to try to make money off of Texas people. Well, they're popping them. They're arresting them proactively before it hits their streets. So we did the buses
at 3 in the morning.
3 in the morning.
So that's when they come in. It's 3 in the. They're not showing up at 12 noon.
Oh no,
they're showing up at 3 in the morning.
That's when
There's
they arrive.
obviously a reason for that.
Right.
They think they're going to get through without being noticed.
Right. And what we found out was a lot of these bus lines now, if you're along, it used to be they had pickup locations. Like you remember the Greyhound terminal we used to have down in Kansas City? Well, they've got an area where they drop them off, but now they can just pick you up and drop you off anywhere. The new deal is.
So they started a whole new line of business now.
Yeah, they have. So that's why when they arrive, they're trying to check everybody out.
They were there to greet them.
But they also did it when they left. And that was like 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon. And they checked the people once the luggage was loaded, they run a dog through. In between, we did the Amtrak train. When the Amtrak train comes in, they know all the conductors. They got a great relationship with all of the train operators. We went to the train station and ran the dogs through the luggage and stuff of the train.
Well, that's a little different than Kansas City, folks. And I know because I've ridden that Amtrak train. We have very little, if any, law enforcement presence on the Amtrak trains here. Nobody pays any attention to it whatsoever.
Really surprised me. I mean, these guys were just rolling.
That's not something I would typically think of and we're going to come up on the break here shortly, but what did they find on the trains when
they found marijuana? In fact, our guys were assisting them. They found a lady with some marijuana, and they just took her marijuana. Okay. And it wasn't this big load, but they just took it and said it's illegal in the state of Texas. Okay. Can't have it.
But so there weren't a lot of drugs on that particular run. Okay. No. I'm assuming the majority of that, other than direct interdiction, when they found that they had a drug deal or whatever the case may be, with those buses, that's probably a little different situation on the buses where they're finding a few more things than you do.
Oh, it's amazing. It's just amazing. It's the most fun I've had in police work in 20 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. He calls this fun. When we see these guys putting their lives on the line every day to protect all of us and what we do in our normal functions at home and out and about. And I think this should give you some appreciation of that, which is why we're doing this, by the way. And in addition to, putting information out there for you about what's coming, we're going to get into that in the next 2 segments about what does this mean for Johnson County. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA.
The Golden Rule. Treat others as you want to be treated. I'm Steve Keeker, and this is one of the founding principles of my firm, Senior Care Consulting. Since 2002, our value statement has included honor our mother and father, respect our elders, care for those in need, and treat your family as our own. We've been honored to help hundreds of families make one of the most difficult decisions they could ever make, serving them in their greatest time of need. If you're looking for someone who can provide you experienced and objective guidance when searching for a senior care community, reach out today and discover the services of Senior Care Consulting at 913-945-2800. 913-945-2800. Know your options and choose with care at seniorcareconsulting.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. As I said, we're on 15 podcast platforms and YouTube. If you want to tell somebody about this show, they can certainly go up there and listen. Or if you want to subscribe, you can do that as well. You know, you may wonder, what does this have to do with health or healthcare? It has a lot to do with it, which is why I'm doing this, okay? Those are our children, our grandchildren that are being poisoned with this stuff that's coming into our communities. We're talking about the drugs. It's also, you know, when we see this sex trafficking coming into our communities, that degrades our communities. So there's a reason why I'm doing this. And by the way, this show's not just going to air here in the Kansas City Metro on our 11 affiliates here. It's going to air across the country on all of our affiliates, because everyone needs to be aware of these issues, and they need also to be aware of what people on the front lines, like Sheriff Cal Hayden and the first responders that are out there across the country, are doing to protect us from this kind of stuff. Even though we seem to have people in other places in this country who turned a blind eye to this and walk away from it, there are parts of this country where they're not turning a blind eye. El Paso, Texas happens to be one of them. So does Johnson County, Kansas. And I think it's important for that message to get out. It directly affects your quality of life. You may not think it does, but it does on a daily basis. And if you don't believe that, take a look at what's happening in some of our big cities. Look at what happens in Kansas City. Look at the shootings. Look at all the things that go on when this kind of thing becomes pervasive in a community. The purpose of what we're talking about today is, how do you stop that before it gets completely out of hand? Well, in Johnson County, thanks to Sheriff Cal Hayden, police departments like the Overland Park Police Department and more, they're doing that. But that's the purpose of doing this kind of broadcast, because it does affect your health. It affects your health, your children's health, your grandchildren's health, and the people around you. So let's get back to this. So you said something off air a minute ago that was kind of amazing. Not only did you guys check trains and buses, but you went to FedEx, you went to the post office, you went to UPS. You had dope dogs. Those are German Shepherd dogs or Belgian Malinois that are trained to detect narcotics. Did you find anything?
Well, at the post office, there was some China white heroin.
China white. The last time I heard China white heroin, I think Darren said it was in a Tom Petty song somewhere.
Oh yeah.
So it's been a while. Okay?
Me too. Me too.
So China white heroin was shipped in the U.S. post office.
Yes.
And nobody at the post office picked that up.
Well, no, the inspector did. And he'll pull packages that he thinks are shaky.
And then you guys came in
and
with
they
the
come
dogs.
in. Yep. And
he alerted on it, and it was China white heroin.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Oh, it's incredible.
Where was that shipped from?
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That's just remarkable.
It's still an active case, so I can't. Yeah.
Enough said. FedEx and UPS. That's always. You know, it's interesting on FedEx and UPS because they always ask you when you take a package, you have to give your information.
Yeah.
So they know who you are. Are people still stupid enough to try to ship through those?
They use fake names, fake IDs. Our guys.
Okay, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, and we're doing it here. We've got that's mostly fentanyl and marijuana. They'll do a lot of marijuana. In fact, the guys who do the packages, they'll look for what they call a marijuana bounce, pot
what
bounce.
Is that?
The package bounces because it's packed so full of marijuana. It's like a pillow, and it'll just bounce. So that they check that.
There's a little known factoid, folks. Bouncing marijuana. I've put people bounce after they do it, but bouncing marijuana.
They do it. And we check FedEx and UPS and the other terminals here with our dogs looking for packages. And we found that
pervasive?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's no risk to it for the bad guys because if it gets delivered and makes it through.
Only 2 of them get through.
That's susceptible loss to them. 1 in 7 of those pills is deadly. And the last one my guys got was about 5 pounds, 20,000 pills. And
so put that in perspective. What would 20,000 doses of fentanyl have the possibility of doing in terms of mortality?
Oh my goodness! Well, a dose is we've got our lab has a picture of a one dose of fentanyl on a lead of a pencil. So and that's why it's so easy to get it anywhere. It's even easier in heroin because it's less, and it's the smaller the packages, the smaller the doses, the easier it is to get them through. So that's a lot. I'd probably kill. I don't know how many people that our lives were saved from that.
And that's you do hear what he's saying here. This is in Johnson County. 5 pounds.
Yeah, and that's just one of the hits. They've got the blue M30 pills. They look like oxycodone, and that's what they do is they
mimic legitimate drugs.
They do, and they got pill presses down there, and they're quite good. Some of them look better than the actual drug, but they.
You told a story on the first broadcast we did about a young man who a friend of his and him took Adderall. Mm-hmm. I remember this, and they took one pill each. And when the parents found him in his room, and he was a good student, he was a good kid, he didn't use drugs or anything else. He took this because he was studying. A lot of college kids do this to prep up for these exams. And what wound up happening to him?
Oh, they found him dead the next morning at his desk.
So do you understand why I'm doing this now? Okay, this is coming through. That was right here in Johnson County. This is coming through in our community, and you need to be aware of this. You need to understand this. You need to understand why having this kind of a law enforcement officer, this kind of a law enforcement department, that Johnson County Sheriff's, Overland Park Police, Spring Hill, Merriam, I'm sure, all of these different departments can talk about this, why this is so important to us. And so FedEx, Post Office, what about UPS?
UPS, same way. They're shipping it through there, and we try to find the packages. You can't find all of them, but you try to get our dogs in there and see what we can hit. You can't run the dog up and down the line because it would just numb the dog. It's too much.
Wear them out.
You look for the suspicious packages, and they're pretty good at that.
Yeah, and so I assume the level of this in El Paso is probably significantly different than what it is here. A lot higher.
Well, it is, and they're shipping it down there like crazy. And it's just like anything else. The closer you are to the source, there's more of it. And
so
then,
the source being Mexico.
Yes, and China's selling Mexico all the precursors for the drugs. So it's amazing how many things are connected to China. It just blows my mind. It seems like we've got all this stuff going on right now, and even national threats and everything else. It's just, I think I think there's a national intent to harm our country.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that. What he's saying when he talks about precursors is, in case you're not aware, is the chemicals that make up fentanyl. And President Biden has talked to Xi about this. I don't know if there's been any progress on it, but he certainly discussed it, is that those chemicals are being shipped from China. They could stop shipping that stuff tomorrow, but they're not doing it, okay? And, I don't know how big of a financial gain there is from this, but in essence, what the sheriff is saying is we're being targeted for this to undermine the culture in this country and what we have in this country. And I think there's probably a lot of truth in that. When we come back from the break, we're going to dig into some more of this. We're going to talk about some of the specific things that he did when he was there with his task force, when they were in El Paso. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in Kansas City. We've got some interesting developments lately in the city, and we're going to chat about that. And what is that going to mean to Johnson County if some of these things that are happening in Kansas City are implemented? Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. You can find out more about us by going to the website americashealthcareadvocate.com. By the way, there will be an election in November, and Sheriff Cal Hayden is running for re-election. The website is calhaydenforsheriff.com. Cal Hayden for sheriff.com. If you want to know more about what's going on, you want to talk with the staff for him, 913-944-2623. I'm sure if you have a civic group, a school group, a church group, you want to have them come out and talk about this, make people aware of what's going on, they can certainly do that, and they'll be happy to do that. All right, so let's go back a minute. How they're screening at the border for this stuff, and they have these giant X-ray machines, et cetera, et cetera. But you said that the Border Patrol people are extremely frustrated. Now, we happen to know that because they were not very happy about the recent legislation that came out of the House and the Senate for all of these bills that were being passed to fund Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, and I'm not going to talk about that. That's another whole issue of politics we don't get into. But nothing was in there for the Border Patrol and to secure this border. And let's talk about why they're frustrated, because you said what's happening is they're not interdicting nearly as much of this stuff at the legal crossings as they used to. Why?
Well, so many are coming across that almost all the Border Patrol guys are doing processing.
Illegal immigrants?
Illegal immigrants, yeah.
Okay.
And they've got this big, huge, when we drove into town, there was this gigantic tent. And it's got a sign, it's federal installation, and you can't take pictures or anything else like that. And that's where they are keeping.
Is that supposed to keep Fox News and from taking pictures of what they're doing?
You know, it's funny because even our senators went down. When they go down and look at these processing places, they had to literally force their way in to see if the government wanted them that tightened up. And from our own senators and states,
they're purposely not wanting this information out to the public.
Absolutely, it is
so
the
what's
biggest
happening, because they're all being diverted into these processing centers. And by the way, I heard a fascinating statistic this morning: less than 6% of the people that are claiming asylum are actually qualified for asylum. 6%. By the way, that's a government number. That's not off of some news organization. 6% of the people coming through legitimately qualify for asylum. So let's go back to this.
Okay.
So they're not processing these things at the border. So what does that mean in terms of drugs, sex trafficking, the rest of it?
It means it's coming through easier. It absolutely is. They're doing their best.
There's great technology there. Why aren't they using it?
They can't staff it because they are all processing the illegal immigrants as they come through.
This is amazing. And then
it is human trafficking on a level you have never seen. They actually, and our guys from El Paso, I said, well, how many are here? He said, we move them out. They move them out of here as fast as they possibly can. And when I got on the plane to leave, I had to leave a day early because I had a debate. But when I went to the airport, the entire airport is lined with chairs, and there's immigrants sitting in all these chairs doing standby flights. Absolutely incredible.
That's amazing. You know, we don't see this stuff and we don't hear this stuff.
Big thing is who's paying for it.
Well, yeah. Who's paying for it and where are they going? I guess there are going to be a lot more of them coming to Kansas City. We'll talk about that in the next segment. So there was one car that you showed us pictures of on the break where the El Paso folks and you had interdicted the car. Talk about what you found.
Well, it was an operation where they had made a buy of 4 kilos from a drug dealer. They worked him. He decided he'd roll over and deliver it to his next guy that was going to do it. Well, they went home and inspected his house. They let him go home because they said at that point, they're certainly not going to go back to Mexico because the cartels will kill them down there because they've been busted by the police. So he was willing to work. So they said, before we let you go in your house, you need to give us consent to search. You got any in there? He said, I got a little. They found another 2 kilos in his house.
So now we got 6.
So they take those drugs and they put 1 good kilo in a drop bag for this transaction. The next day, the bad guy shows up. The other bad guy, he makes a transaction to him, and then we had a group of us, DEA and a whole bunch of us, following this guy, and all they have to find is when he drives is some traffic infraction to legally stop him. Well, he's going 90 miles an hour down the highway. So that was it, and they got him at a local convenience store to stop for gas, and the dog hit on his car, and he had a hidden compartment inside of his car, and they got another 2 kilos there. So at that point, we got 8. And eventually they got more kilos in his house.
This is unbelievable.
It's just incredible. It's like the old days in the Coke Wars.
So now I'll ask a really interesting question here. Why does this concern us? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the sheriff said we're halfway to everywhere. So what does that mean?
Well, Kansas City is right dead center of the country. So I35 runs through it. I70 goes through it. Or you can get to any major interstate from Kansas City. When they call us the heartland, it truly is, because we're the heart, and all the arteries run out to all the major cities. So this is a great place for distribution.
That's not exactly something we want to be known for, but you're hearing now, this is a great place for distribution.
Well, you look at all the warehouses we got coming around here. That's why they're here. I mean, they're looking at they can bring it in here in a central location. We were literally halfway to everywhere.
And then they take it and send it out to the rest of the country. Or they distribute it here in Johnson County.
Right.
Or in Kansas City, or in Wyandotte County, or in Miami County.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Basically, what you're saying is anywhere and everywhere that's around here, we're dealing with this issue.
Absolutely.
This is amazing. It's amazing. It's important to hear this. It's also disheartening in a lot of ways because this is not something that's front and center in the media. I don't know if they choose just not to cover the stories, or maybe they're not aware of it. I don't know what the issue is, but it certainly is interesting to me that, here on this show that runs on the weekends across the country, we're talking about something that affects everybody in this country, and it's not being talked about as much as it should be. How strapped are you guys, trying to keep up with this in terms of the volume of this stuff coming through here? In not just the drugs, the sex trafficking stuff as well.
It's all intertwined. And it's not. I mean, it's children involved in this. There's as far as the human trafficking, sex trafficking, it's incredible what's coming across that border, and it's tragic. Because this wasn't a major problem before. Now it is everywhere.
Well, let's just be frank about this. You're saying it wasn't a major problem in the previous administration.
Absolutely.
And in this administration, because they've thrown the doors open, it's a major problem.
Yeah, and you're right. I am amazed the press is not all over this. I mean, we've had more deaths in this country. It is the fentanyl and overdose poisonings are the number one cause of death, but for men between 18 and 40. It's the number one cause of death. We've almost had as many deaths as COVID, and that you don't hear it out of the press.
What is this you brought with you today to show?
This is Noxalone. It is something that every parent or grandparent or any person should have in their home. Our officers carry it, and we call it Narcan. And what it is if you overdose and pass out from an opioid, and that could be fentanyl, heroin, anything that are any of the big 3 narcotics. We've seen them where they're just blue. They're dead. And you give them a spray of this. There's 2 of these in there. You give them a spray in their nose, and it's like Lazarus. They come right back. And there's no downside to it because if somebody passes out in front of you and you don't know, give them a shot of this because there's no downside to it. It doesn't harm you at all, and the only thing it does is bring you back if you've got an opioid in your system. I'm going to
hold this up again so you can see what this is. You can buy this in the drugstore. In fact, Dave Thiessen, our producer on the video side, said that he's seen it in drugstores. So if you are a parent or a grandparent, this is something that you should definitely have. I intend to buy these. This is the first I've seen of this. I didn't know it was available in drugstores, but you never know. Okay, you never know when it's going to be in your house or they're going to have a friend over or something's going to happen where you may be glad you had this as opposed to not having it. So that's fascinating. Thank you for doing that.
Well, and the comment you made about you never know is the new fentanyl deal Johnson County's putting on. That's the name of their new program to try to educate about fentanyl.
So
they call it Never Know.
I didn't know there was a program.
They just started it. In fact, we're looking at schools because I want to get the kids first. But Johnson County started a deal with mental health and treatment facilities. They're trying to get the word out. You never know because you never know if the pill's the one that'll kill you or if you're not going to make it because of
All right,
NOx.
we're up on the break. We come back, we're going to get more into that, and then we're going to talk about what's happening in Kansas City. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting here on the HIE Radio Network. This is probably one of the most important shows we've ever done with Sheriff Cal Hayden, the Johnson County Sheriff, here in our studio today. This is part of the program that they are starting to educate kids. If you want to find out more about this, you can certainly call his office at 913-944-2623. If your church is doing a children's group, 913-944-2623. And if you think this isn't serious, take a look at this. These are candies that are available that these kids are getting. They're being distributed to them. What's in this package?
There are gummies in there that have high levels of THC, which is...
What is a high level and what you're talking about here?
Well, that one in your hand is 600 milligrams if you eat 6 of them. And the problem is a kid that eat one, and they don't know what it is, and if their friend gives them a piece of candy, they don't know what's in it, they can literally overdose.
How much does a doctor typically prescribe medically of milligrams of THC?
5 milligrams.
Did you hear that? 5 milligrams, and this package right here has 600 in it. This is serious. Not just here in Johnson County. I'm running this across the country. You need to look at this, okay? If you're a parent, grandparent, whatever the case may be, this, and tell your kids, if somebody hands you something, do not take it or eat it. I don't care how much they know they're their friend, because they don't know what it is, okay? This is very serious. 600 milligrams of THC. This is just almost too much to comprehend that this goes on. So now I'm going to switch gears. We're going to talk about something that's kind of political, but I think it needs to be talked about. We have a mayor who's decided, Mayor Quinton Lucas, that they're going to put forward a resolution that makes us a quasi-safe haven city for illegal immigrants to come in here. What are the consequences of doing something like that? Because what they're talking about, and what I've heard and what I've read, is that he's welcoming the overflows from New York and from Denver and from Chicago, where they can't house these people. So he's offering to bring them to Kansas City. Forget about the humanitarian part of this right now. I just want to talk about what does it mean in terms of the kinds of things that we're talking about. This stuff, okay, sex trafficking and the rest of it. Sheriff?
One of the big problems with the immigrants coming here, we don't know who's coming. They have no way of knowing. It's not like they've got a computer record. And you're seeing military-aged young men come in our country. You're seeing terrorists come in our country. Crime is up everywhere that these immigrants have come in. You got to think, if we don't know who they are, where they've been, wouldn't it be nice when you look at all of the mental institutions we have, all the jails, and be able to empty those and give them to a country? And I think that's what's happening, because our crime is going up everywhere. And the press and everybody will tell you that that's just not true. That's baloney. We're fighting it every single day. The addiction rates are up. Look what they did in San Francisco. Look what they did in Seattle. I mean, those towns are literally being destroyed.
It's funny because they're starting to have some serious backlash for that.
They are.
A very interesting article in the Wall Street Journal this morning talked about the Chinese population, which typically votes very heavily left-wing Democrat, has now backlashed against the city council and the mayor and the city attorney there because they're 100% against the exact same things that Sheriff Cal Hayden's talking about: the drugs, the prostitution, the homelessness in the cities that promotes all of this stuff. So back to the Kansas City issue. What is this going to mean if we throw open the doors in Kansas City and say we're a magnet for this now? You can have more of these people come to Kansas City. You've got homeless people all over the streets in Kansas City. Everywhere. You're starting to see it bleed over into Overland Park in Johnson County. What is that? You can't even take care of those people. How the hell are we going to take care of an influx of these people coming in who we don't know who they are? And if they're coming in to bring this kind of stuff in here, and this is not fentanyl, this is THC, but we're seeing the same thing. These people are bringing this in here. Is that going to create more of the same thing?
Absolutely. Look at all the cities that have done the sanctuary city thing. Look at Chicago. murder capital of the country. New York City, people are moving out of there in droves because the quality of life is terrible. And it's not going to be a surprise to see what comes. It's just not. We can see it right now. You don't have to have a crystal ball to know that the cities that wanted all this, now that they've got these problems, they want to spread it out to the rest of us that didn't want any part to do with this. I will tell you, this open border, the only people that are making out in this thing are the cartels and criminals, because they are skinning these people. They're taking their life savings to bring them to the United States. And then we want them for cheap labor. The whole thing makes me sick. It's just the wrong thing to do, and it's inhumane. I find it funny that Mayor Lucas and all these guys that want to do this haven't been to the border, and they don't see it firsthand and know how absolutely terrible it is for these people coming across.
And you're saying for the actual people that are coming here, this is not the land of dreams for them and milk and honey.
What's happening to them with cartels on the way for wherever they're coming from is absolutely incredibly terrible. They treat them terrible.
You know, I don't do politics on this show. You know that from all the years I've been doing this. But this concerns me. I've got 6 grandchildren, okay? And when I see this kind of stuff, it scares the hell out of me, okay? And it should scare all of you, because this is significant and it's serious. And what does that mean with local issues? Well, it means things like this sanctuary city issue that people are talking about in Kansas City. And for those of us here in Johnson County who think we're not affected by this, we are, because it's going to overflow here, and we're going to be dealing with that. It's not going to be isolated to them. They can drive across state line just as easily as anybody else can. Okay, and these issues are already here, and you're hearing the sheriff say it's going to continue to be an issue, and it's going to get worse. I think it's important to understand what's going on. I think it's important to understand the sex trafficking, the issue with fentanyl, the issue with this THC repackaging of these candies and these things for kids that have dramatic impact on their health and could kill them, and the fact that we literally have to look at this now as something we should have in our home. And by the way, I will be getting this and putting it in our home just in case. Okay, this is unfortunate. It really is. But that's where we're at, and I think it's important to understand the issues. I really can't tell you thank you enough for doing this. I think it's important for people to see unfiltered what is going on and what does it mean to them in their daily life. And that's what you're doing. I thank you and all the men and women at the Johnson County Sheriff's Department and all the men and women in this country who are in law enforcement that are doing their best to try to stop this from happening. Thank you for doing this.
Well, it's our honor, too. It's an honorable profession, and it's not me doing it. It's our heroes out there doing the job.
If you want to help the sheriff, he's running for re-election again. Cal Hayden for sheriff.com is the website. You can tell he's sincere. You can tell he does this because he cares. The phone number, 913-944-2623. Thank you for listening to this and watching the show today. If you're watching it on YouTube or the podcast, we really appreciate your watching, and we look forward to your responses to the broadcast. And now I'll leave you with this thought from Albert Einstein. The one who follows the crowd will usually get no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone will find himself in places no one has ever been. Thank you for listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. Goodbye, America.